Hello and welcome back to another Malifaux crew unpack video with Tabletop Odyssey. Today we are taking a deep dive into the Cadmus keyword and its master, the Nexus. This is an Explorer Society video, and of course you guys were really mean to me, knowing full well that I own 5 crews within Explorers. You decided that you wanted to see one of the 3 that I don't. So this is going to be a very interesting video. I've had to lean on the great expertise of Jericho to help me out here. With that being said, let's get into the video. So, whom is Nexus, and why would you want to play as Cadmus? See, the Nexus is not just any creature. It began as a project of Titania, the Autumn Queen, in an attempt to create a spy for the Neverborn, a creature that operates as a hive mind and can spread its Cadmus virus into hosts so it can operate from a central nexus. From there it can survey the whole of society from all over, as long as a single seed is within them. Now, with all creatures, however, the more it learned, the smarter it became, and despite Titania's orders to not inhabit the Fae, the parasite spread anyway. When Titania found out that, she locked the hive into deep hibernation, closing it off, as you could not simply kill a creature that lived as long as its spores inhabited a single host. It was perhaps fate when Gretchen Janus of the Explorer Society managed to release them from their bonds, and now they work for her and the Society, spreading their Cadmus parasite across Malifaux. So now we know who Nexus is. Why play them? So Cadmus is a hive mind collective full of parasitic hosts. So if you want to play this keyword, you might want everyone to join a collective hive mind. Perhaps you really like the spidery aesthetic. Maybe you like zombies, or zombie spiders. Although not perhaps in the way you expect. Maybe you want a crew that's hard to kill and unique within its operation. You really like bugs after all. Maybe you expect to inhabit every single living creature in the universe eventually, because, after all, that is what a parasite intends, right? Or maybe you're just one of those people who really like a sense of community and feeling connected to other people, even if that does happen to be via a hive mind from a parasite. Now, when you are playing Nexus, you once again have 2 title options to take on, the first of which is the Heart of the Hive, the Nexus itself. Now, this information network uses the Hivemind card as a indicator for some crew abilities. The first things to consider are the importance of parasite tokens. Now, these are great tokens that when you kill a model with a parasite, you get to gain a soul stone, which is great because you have an awful lot of abilities that require soul stones. This combines with the We Are Legion ability that allows when a model would have an enemy gain a parasite token, but it cannot because it already has one, then they're dealt 1 damage. So trying to apply a token twice is going to deal them damage. Now, you also have a New Host ability for all of your friendly Cadmus models, and that is after this model is dealt damage by or deals damage to an enemy model as a result of an opposed duel. This model may drain a soul stone to give them a parasite. So if you've got some excess stones and you've either dealt damage to them or they've dealt damage to you, hand out a parasite and you can get them on the people who you need. All of this We Are Legion is going to stack up with damage the more parasites that you can hand out. That being said, unique Cadmus models also have a very interesting skill known as the Exoskeletal Link. It is an attack action that does no damage and can target friendly models. If the target, friendly or enemy, has a parasite token, your skill becomes 8, which means you only need a 3 instead of a 5. Now this allows you to place the model using this action in base contact with the target 6 inches away, and then places the target in base contact with an ally within 6 inches of it. So, for example, you can use it to throw an enemy into 6 inches with an ally and you take its place, or you can also just jump to an ally and then place the target in base contact with yourself or another ally within 6. Quite fun. Also, there is web markers to consider. Now, these are really important within the Cadmus, and they are going to be used in a couple of different ways. Now, web markers, they're 50 mil, quite big, severe, so they're going to be slowing down enemies, and models in base contact with a web marker cannot be removed by other models friendly to them. You remember, you can ignore this because you are friendly to the marker, okay? So it's not going to affect you, but it's going to slow them down and they can't be pushed by it, their allies. Which means if you put these in between enemies, it's going to stop them from pushing each other around, especially on things like informants where they really need to get to points. Sticking it near a point can kind of block off some of those avenues, maybe. Heart of the Hive. Now, Heart of the Hive herself is the master, and she is got a lot going on. She's quite a complicated master, unlike some of the previous crews that we've looked at so far. Now, the key things to look at is our great defenses. She's got 6-7 in defense, and she adds to that the terrifying ability, putting enemies' attacks on a negative, and then 14 wounds means she's going to take a little bit to take down. She also has connected consciousness. Now, this allows her, when declaring non-general action, so she can't walk, she can't interact, she can't slam, this model can draw line of sight and range from an ally or model with a parasite. That includes enemies within 12 inches that was not used for this ability this turn. So her 1-inch Hive Strike is essentially a 13-inch attack, provided there's a model within range. This also means that she can use her abilities from as far out as possible, expressly the Will of Cadmus ability, which quite possibly is, although expensive, the best action on this card. Now, the Will of Cadmus itself targets a model with a parasite token or an ally, and then the target declares an attack action chosen and controlled by this model. It's an obey. It ignores engagement. It means if you've got a parasite on an enemy, you can tell them to push back their own markers, pick up their own bombs, or tell your allies to do the same thing. It allows you to essentially use the enemy as an interact point themselves. Of course, you can use it to attack people if you so wish, or move them away from points, but I think the best usage of this is to interact. Now, we do have Siphon Power on the card as well, which are quite a few models within this keyword get, and it's a very good ability. When you declare an action, you can deal damage to a friendly model within 4 to add a suit of your choice. Now, the way we're going to be using this the most is on the Citizens of Malifaux signature action, which is a pulse of 3 inches on a TN of 7, where X is equal to the turn number. So you choose up to X plus 1 remains or web markers within range. So obviously on turn 1 that's going to be 2, turn 2 is 3, and so on. You are then allowed to remove those markers and summon an eyes and ears into base contact with each of them. Now, if you're siphoning power here, you can get a tome to allow you to draw a card as well, which is going to make up for the fact that TN7 is something you might miss a few times. It allows you to recover the card and fish out for better cards in your hand. Now, there are lots of ways to get cards in this crew, but this is a pretty easy one to get at the cost of a single damage to a friendly model, which can include yourself, or you can throw it off on an eyes and ears if you want, which upon their death will actually draw you yet another card if you so choose. So, a very interesting mechanic there. Now, Hive Strike is a good attack, don't get me wrong. It's skill 6 and has a raise of 3 if they got a parasite. Now, the main thing that you're going to use off of this is the Terror for Bite trigger. Now, the damage is okay, it's a perfectly modest attack, but the Terror for Bite is going to keep you alive and allow for more siphoning power off yourself, and just make sure that this model stays alive because she really does need to. Also, making web markers can be great, especially if you're using connected consciousness for this. Okay, now we're looking at whispers in the web. So the whispers in the web allows you to target a web marker within 6 inches and then make a web marker into base contact with each enemy scheme marker within 3 inches of the first web marker. So if you need to clear out some enemy schemes, whispers in the web is the way to do it. But not just that, because you have to do a stone to get rid of their enemy scheme markers as well, right? So it gets loads of webs out, which is going to help summon more, right? So it's a nice summoning sequence between them. You throw down webs, you're going to Citizens of Malifaux every turn, try and get as many eyes and ears out as you can, and then someone else is going to upgrade them into stronger things for you. The more eyes you can get out in a turn, the better your turn's probably going to end up being. Now moving on to the Shambling Nest. Now this is a totem, and you get 2 of these, and they are not very defensive. They've only got defense of 3, 10 wounds. 10 wounds is going to be really good for them though. But the key important thing is the fact that, first of all, they can be used as nodes from Nexus if they're 12 inches away. And these guys also have from shadows, so you can place them as far up as you need, and you can also place them into good positions to start scoring immediately. Whether you need them to place a bomb down, well, remember if they're from shadows they don't get a bomb at the start, but they can pick up bombs and other things as well. They can push boundaries, beat markers, get onto points early. Now these guys also have the dust and cobwebs, so they can make web markers themselves, which you will want to be doing, especially if you're going to be getting webs in all the right places. Now these guys also have an interesting front of cards. See, they reduce all damage dealt to other allies within 4x1, so sometimes you actually want them near allies, but sometimes you want them spread out in a scheming position. So it can be an interesting thought to consider. Now, off of that, however, they do have Demise Broken Nest, so if they do manage to get killed, and let's be honest, they probably will die, they can remake an additional Remains marker. So when they're hitting out 2 Remains markers, remember, Nexus can turn Remains markers into eyes and ears. So, a really good way to get out some more of those. Good value investment. Now, it does have 2 attacks here. It's got ticks and leeches, and Swarm of Mites. So ticks and leeches is only going to do 1 damage. It's got a lot of range, but you can add a suit if they've got Parasite, which might allow you to Stone Trigger to draw 2 cards, or you can hand out something like Poison, maybe, or heal yourself. It's okay. Realistically speaking, Swarm of Mites is going to be used more often to pulse out in 6-inch range to deal 1 damage to enemy models who have a Parasite token. So if you can get these Parasites off, these guys are going to be able to just spam off a little bit of chip damage within quite a big range, but these guys are going to be doing a lot of interacting on your behalf. This brings us to the other title, the Whim of the Hive. Gives us the Nexus one of many. Now, if you choose to take this title, it does not have a totem, because you get 3 masters. Now, this is a little bit more difficult. You do not have the same 12-inch range if something's happened, and you don't have the defensivity. What you do have is extra AP. You're going to need to be using webs and parasites more aggressively. Parasites to get some stones back, and webs because they're going to be used more frequently. You have the forced reaction on all of your models, which will happen maybe once or twice a game maximum, but it's a good way to win duels that really need winning. So after an enemy model with a parasite token cheats fate or declines to, you can drain a soul stone to reduce that enemy model's final duel total by 2. Okay? Now remember, it doesn't say cheats fate against this model. so you can also shut off things like movement abilities if you want. Which brings us to Soul Shock, which is a signature action given to all friendly Cadmus models. Now this does actually help out peons as well, because these guys actually then get a signature. So eyes and ears love this. Cadmus models with Soul Shock once per activation can 3-inch pulse, and enemy models within range have to pass a duel or gain a parasite token and take 1 damage. If they die, you get to summon an eyes and ears. And if you pay a stone, you get to just give an enemy model a parasite. This is a good way for getting parasites out because it's just a 3-inch pulse. It is a very easy duel to beat, however, so it's more about sucking cards out of their hand. Just gaining more of an advantage, because if they don't have cards in hand, then it's going to be able to have your forced reaction to be more beneficial. Then less likely to want to cheat, and then lowering the final duel to a duel will be more effective. Which brings us to our one of many, and there is many. There's 3 of them. Oh my god. So as we've had before with Vix having Master 2, Nexus is Master 3, and it doesn't get a totem as a result. Now, one of many is way more fragile. It has 7 wounds and 5/5 defenses. That is not great. Coddles is probably its main defense here. They can't cheat if you're within 2 inches of another ally, which means that you really need to be keeping your friends close. And you want to take that into account when you look at Take Over For Me, a tactical action you have with a stone, which costs, which is within 6-inch range. It costs a stone, and you can basically, if one of your Nexus dies, you can replace a target within range with a Nexus. It heals 2, and then it does gain a summon token, unfortunately, so it will shut off your interact abilities, but you can turn even an eye and ear into your master again. On 2 health, of course. But these guys do heal very easily. And then you've got Tummy Full of Screams, so after this model suffers damage from an enemy attack, you can give them a parasite. So if they do want to attack your masters, they're going to get parasites, and you want parasites on everything. That being said, you are looking at Embrace of the Spinneret. So this really says that you need webs down, and thankfully, you're going to be putting down a lot. The entire keyword has lots of good ways to get webs down, and while you do want to use them for summoning with Snug in the Swarm, which removes web markers to summon an eyes and ears, you also want web markers around, especially for a target you're planning on focus firing with Embrace, which will increase the skill of your duel total by 2, making you a skill 7 attack. Now, this attack does 2 damage to the enemy, and it heals you, and if you have an additional raise, you get to heal an additional 1. So it's just tipping off any damage that they've done to you, especially if it's chip damage. Now, the suits here are really important. First of all, Infect, nice handing out poison, it's going to add up over the game. Tag is great to handing out parasites. Spin Web makes more webs. If you don't have one on the first one, you're going to get one on the second if you can get a crow out. But the other 2 are the most important. First of all, Leech Magic. Once a turn, if they have a parasite, you can pay a stone and draw 2 cards, which is really going to fill your hand up for the best cards, which you will want to use especially to get a ram to subsume Will, which turns your damage 2 attack into a damage 4 attack, provided they have a parasite. Now remember, you have 3 of these guys, so if you can get a lot of rams in hand, you're going to be hitting for some 8-inch range 4 damage attacks that heal you as well at skill 7 if they're in a web. Synergy is important here. You have a lot of ways to draw cards. You're going to need to try and get as many rams as possible for that. Which brings us to your henchman for the crew, Dr. Meredith Stanley. She is an auto-take, regardless of the keyword. Choices, whether you're choosing hearts or one of many, Meredith Stanley is an auto-take regardless. If you don't think this is the case, I will be very surprised. She has modest defenses with 5/5 and 8 wounds, but she has protected Cadmus, so you can discard a card and allow a friendly Cadmus in range to take the action instead. But most importantly are two major things. First of all is breakthrough research, so after an allied peon within 6 inches is killed, infuse a soulstone. You're going to have a lot of allied peons within range, and they are all probably going to die. You're going to get a lot of stones from them. Second of all is a Fungus Among Us, which costs a stone, to turn an Eye and Ears once per turn within 8 inches into a Cadmus minion. This is your Berserker Husks and your spelleaters. The new model then heals 4 and gains a summon token. Unfortunate really, but still. For the most part, you are going to be using it for Berserker Husks because they're great at killing. They've got a signature melee attack. But spelleaters can be useful too, depending on the crew that you're in and depending on the mission. She is also a formidable healer to the party. She has healing energy, which allows the target to heal 2, increasing more with ranges, and allow you to push enemy models away, as well as Doctor's Orders, which allow you to discard a card and allow a friendly model to move 6 inches. That's a signature as well, so if you need to get people up the table quickly, she can use her actions to compensate. However, you always want at least one of your actions to be a Fungus Among Us, because you want the upgrade every single turn. You do also have a nice splash attack that deals 2 damage out and 1 to things within an inch, and has a chance of summoning Eyes and Ears if you kill. But otherwise, she's mostly going to be leveling people up and using your plethora of cards and stones to get people upfield and staying alive. Now, Cavatica. Cavatica is a very interesting piece. He has a superiority complex, which reduces damage if enemies have tokens, which of course they are, parasites, and if you're being attacked by a melee or gun action, you can't cheat. 6 willpower, 9 wounds, he's going to stick around a little bit. Now, the main thing that you're going to be using this guy for is parasitic infiltration. Once per activation, target an ally or a model with a parasite and make a scheme. He is your main way of getting schemes out on the field. At range, 8 inches is really good, even if it is only once per activation. But remember, Heart of the Hive can order him to do an action, which means that this can happen out of activation too. And with a trigger that places him 4 inches means he doesn't have to walk too much either. That's basically a whole walk right there. Now, you will, of course, still have 2 other actions, one of which will probably be either Exoskeletal Connection, but if you don't, you have Called Out, which is your main target for siphoning power. Remember, you've got this as well. Take a damage on an ally, and you can get a suit of your choice. Now, Called Out moves a target enemy 2 inches for every token, and then removes a token from them. You can make this a 3 damage attack with a ram, but there are 2 other triggers that I like best. First of all are the Draw Out Secrets trigger to make a scheme at range. It's a 10-inch range now. And then the Together trigger, which is going to add an ally to get an extra attack. So some of your bigger hitters, like the Nightsilk Creeper, might benefit from this. Finally, he does have a fancy cane, but that's really only going to be used if you're stuck in melee and you need to heal yourself, so take that as you will. Then we've got the Archivist. I quite like the Archivist, but he isn't always an auto take. He does some very specific things very well, but you need to make sure you're in the right situation. So first of all, 11 wounds, 6 willpower. That's nice. He has Dust and Cobwebs to make web markers, and then the Vanish trigger to place upfield, so you can ignore the walking. And he can shape the land when he activates to drain a stale stone to choose a mark within 6 and make a copy of it 6 inches away. And you can pick up webs that are behind you and throw them ahead of you if need be. There are some other applications, but that would be the main use. You've then got the Inaudible Whisper, which is going to be the main target for your siphoning power. See, Inaudible Whisper, flat 3 damage on a 10-inch magical attack. If you get a raise, you can draw a non-joker tome from your discard. So if you've got any severes, that's going to be a great thing to pick up. But you can also siphon power to get in a tome like Draw Out Secrets, to ignore demises and weird defenses with Killer Fees, to get allies to get in there as well. Something to consider. I think siphoning power your Vanish on your Dust and Cobwebs is probably the best use, but sometimes you really need to get schemes out or get some allies up the field. Now, he does have a really cool stone trigger here. You can discard, the target has either got to discard a tome or gain a parasite and you get to draw. Now, this is either going to rip cards from their hand, which is never good for them, or it's going to get you cards into your hand, which are going to be able to use for all your multiple TNs that you're going to need. He can be great if you need damage from range, and he's a user of Exoskeletal Connection, and he puts out webs. He's useful, but when is something to consider. Fighting for his spot is the Nightsilk Creeper, or perhaps alongside him if you are in one of many. The Nightsilk Creeper is an assassin. See, they can jump through walls essentially using Expert Climber as they ignore vertical distance. And Strand to Strand allows them to, when they activate, to drain a Soul Stone to place in contact with a web within 12. So if you've been doing your job and getting webs out, this guy's going to be bouncing across out of nowhere, meaning that they can use their main 3 damage attack without wasting anything on movement. Now the Shalarissarai gains an extra +2 skill if they're in base contact with a web marker, making them skill 8, so get those webs down in the right place. You're going to be teleporting to one, remember? And then they've also got a Drink Blood trigger, which allows you to heal anything that you do to them, which is absolutely fantastic. You can also make webs yourself within 6 inches, so you can set up for the next turn if need be. If you manage to kill your target, you can place a web down with your last AP, and then bounce to it at the start of your next one. The Set the Spider to the Fly trigger, however, is really cool because an enemy model with a parasite in an inch of the marker gets yanked all the way to you 6 inches away. Which means, you know, you don't have to jump to them, they're right there with you. Finally, you've got Seize Prey, which is your signature action, and models in base contact with the web marker take a negative this. You can place it in base contact with an ally, so you can kidnap that model from pretty much anywhere within 6 inches, especially if they've got a web marker in range. It also places you within 4, or you can make a web marker in range. Something to consider. Veritably useful, but not all of the time. Next up, we've got an interesting pair. Now, I have to consider these two together because realistically speaking, there will be very few situations you will be taking Kainhearse without Ahool and vice versa. Kainhearse, however, does have some good synergy with both the Nightsilk Creeper and his buddy Ahool, in the fact that they're both beasts, and the Scent of Blood, once per activation, when a friendly beast within 6 inches declares attack, it gains a positive, making these guys a little bit nastier. He does have Camouflage and Resilient, so he is a little bit harder to take down, especially with he's in cover, but you're going to be using things like Lost in the Hunt on Ahool and your Creeper to, once per turn, choose a non-leader ally and make it declare the charge. If it's a beast, it's getting a positive to this. Exactly. Extra charges means extra movement, which means more likelihood to get to points that you need to do, but also it's a great saving of AP here, so you're going to get more damage too. He does have a nice 2 damage custom firearm with an inbuilt injure trigger, but it also has the paired hunter ability, which is on both its melee and range, allowing Ahool to place within an inch of the target. Now, Ahool has a great ability that we'll see in a moment, which is going to generate an extra attack off this. Which brings us to Ahool. Ahool has made to kill, so when it is placed, it's going to gain an extra melee. And this will also trigger, not only of Kainhearse action, but of aggressive leap, allowing it to place anywhere within 6 inches, but it then can't interact. So be careful with this. He is not a scheme runner. But if you want to interact move, I guess that kind of works. It's also just really good at getting across the field with speed 7. Which brings us to Terrorize. This is going to be great at pushing people off of objectives, and also on your heels places you into base contact with it so you can get more made to kill. But this guy is really difficult to kill. He is deceptively difficult. He does only have 9 wounds, but hard to kill is ludicrously good when you have an inbuilt ram on your main attack, of which has the trigger to heal you the amount by which you deal damage. So, deal 2 damage, heal 2. Nasty. So bringing yourself back up to that hard to kill constantly. You also have the Thin the Herd trigger, so an ally can declare an attack targeting the same model. So if you keep all your beasts close together, this could be a good combo. Next up, we have the peons and minions, and first of all are the eyes and ears. Now remember, both of your masters can summon these off of webs, and Heart the Hive off of remains as well. It's fairly easy for them to do so, and these guys are expendable. And not just in the sense of the word, but also because their demise expendable means when they die, you can either drop a scheme or draw a card, which is fantastic, if I'm being honest. Because you really want cards to be the best in your hand, getting rams if you're in one of many, or just high cards in general for your TNs, and schemes in the right place if need be. They are, outside of Cavatica, your main schemer. Now, Free Hat is interesting. It kills you, but enemy models in base contact with you are going to gain a Parasite. So you can hand off a Parasite and then draw a card. Not a bad action. Remember, if you are in one of many, you guys also get the signature action as well, to spam out for Parasites. And you have the Innocent Bystander defense, which puts TN of 12 on your actions. It's not going to save you, but occasionally it might make someone cheat. You then have Eavesdrop. You're probably never going to use this. It just allows you to look at their hand, basically, and discard if you wish. Realistically speaking, these guys are going to be summoned for cheap. They are either going to be upgraded into husks or spelleaters, and if they aren't, they're going to be used to walk into the correct position, either to kill themselves for a card or a scheme, or to hand out parasites. And that is pretty much it. Which brings us to Berserker Husks. Now, these guys you can hire, and it's possibly worth doing so, but you definitely want to leave at least one to grow up from an eyes and ears. They are your main damage dealers, and although they're not particularly defensive, with Resilient being their only defense and 8 wounds, they do have Drawn to Pain, which allows you to get some extra movement if you're damaged, and Ruthless, ignoring weird abilities. Combine that with a signature melee action means that these guys are going to be your main source of hurt outside of the clear beaters like the Nightsilk Creeper, and these guys have the Terror for Bite to heal when they attack. Shove Aside as well gets you extra movement, but really they're not going to be doing too much else. They do have the Clamber ability, which allows you to deal damage to yourself and get 7-inch movement and move through models and terrain. So if you're caught behind a building or something, jumping through the other side can be quite fun, but it is not a signature action, which sucks. But your signature, apart from your melee, is also the Dust and Cobwebs to make a web in range. These guys sometimes are just gonna spam this 3 times to put 3 webs down to summon eyes and ears off. and sometimes that is okay. Which brings us to your other upgrading option, which is the spelleater. Now, this model is niche. I think it will find more use in One of Many. First off, Aegis makes it a tiny bit more defensible. And redirect magic at the cost of a stone, you can funnel enemy magic actions at a different model in 6 inches instead, including, if the enemy was within 6, back at them. So against crews that rely heavily on magic, like the Fae keyword, these guys can be really annoying to face. Now, what do these guys actually provide for the crew? Now, they do have an 8-inch magic attack, so they don't have to be in melee. They can stand on a point and blast out a 1 damage attack. Don't worry though, it does 2 damage if they've got a token, which could be a parasite. You can also make that 3 damage if you happen to have a ram, siphoning life in the process. As well as draining magic, you can discard their cards to draw as well. You have the signature down to the last drop, which is a range of 12, and once per activation, an enemy model with a parasite token can be targeted and dealt 1 damage. You can make a web within an inch. That's really good, especially if you want to set up for One of Many, getting people stuck in a web from 12 inches away, or having your creeper teleport to them. And if it's not quite in range, well, if the Archivist is, he can always throw it out an extra 6. But that's really not the main use of these guys. Now, first of all, they've got food for the Hive. These guys are really useful at pushing people up, and because they're largely going to be summons, you don't particularly care too much. They can target friendly models and move them up to their speed towards a piece of terrain in its line of sight. If it ends a move in base contact with a web, it's dealt 1 damage. That's a shame. So you make a web marker 12 inches out on an enemy, and then send people towards them if you want. Or if someone else throws out a web, you can send them towards that. This essentially makes up for the fact that you don't really have an onward or like skill within the crew. These guys are going to be pushing people for them. Now, you do have a really cool trigger that I've yet to mention so far, which is the transmutation trigger. Now, this strips the target of a token and then gives it a parasite. Now, why is this interesting? Well, first of all, it gets rid of enemy tokens, which are nasty, things like focus and stuff, and gives them a parasite, which you love. But also, you can give this to allies, especially if it's on the food for the Hive action that you can target friendly models. And, well, it's not just allies, it's any friendly model. And remember, if the model has a parasite token and it dies, you get a stone. But you're already getting a stone when most things die, so you can get 2 stones. So if your eyes and ears want to stay in place, well, just, I don't know, give them focus and replace it with a parasite. And then now they die for 2 stones. Or you can hand it out to allies and just make them a little bit more valuable when they die. It's quite a handy thing, especially when it's on food for the Hive, because you get that push for free. As part of the action, you can strip away a token, and it doesn't even have to be a friendly token, and give a parasite to him as well. Nice. Which brings us on to things that are out of keyword, and really, I know this is probably a bit of a cop-out, but I've gone with the Intrepid Effigy and the Intrepid Emissary here as my 2 out of keyword options. Now, a special mention to the Crypsis core, while we're here, that does extra damage if it's got a token on, so they can hit from min 3 and have some synergy with the likes of Kainhearse. But I've gone with these 2 because your keyword synergy is kind of important. Quick Study gives both the Intrepid Fates the keyword of your master, so they are going to be counted as Cadmus models and therefore can access the crew card. This means you can spam the crew card like Exoskeletal Link to throw people upfield. Not bad for a 2-cost model here. And this guy's other action is probably just using the rocky path to throw an aura hazardous out, making a little more bubble of pain. You probably won't use laid back too often unless you're planning on upgrading yourself into the Intrepid Fate, but otherwise you are basically spamming Exoskeletal Link here. Now, if you decide to take the bigger version instead for 8 cost, be wary, but they are going to keep your master alive a lot longer, especially the Heart of the Hive, who really needs to stay alive for your extra interactions to work. Now, this guy has quick study, so he is a Cadmus model. That means he does count for protecting Meredith as well, which is funny because this guy's main job is protection. He is quite fast with speed 7 though, so don't count that out. But 11 wounds and stalwart protection, reducing damage dealt to friendly models within T by 1. That includes himself. So he's going to be tanking on that. Now combine this with Phalanx to choose a friendly model once per activation within 6. You're going to place up to them and give their target shielded, with a trigger to give another model shielded too. Could be you. This is just going to get you right in the thick of things and getting that Stalwart Protector up on them as well, keep them alive. You then have a Stone Spear, which can strip friendly tokens from models within 2 inches to receive a positive. Now, when things are summoned, remember that they are going to be picking up slow, so you can strip that off, if that helps. Otherwise, if you've got some spare parasites sticking around and you can reapply them easily enough, strip that if you want a positive. But he can kidnap using the heave trigger, which is nice, hand out adversary, which is nice, and heal, which is nice. He's just a very solid defensive piece that's going to keep your masters around. Now we've talked a long time about the models themselves, let's talk a little bit about how to play them. We've got the Heart of the Hive Tactica first, so if you're playing her and the Shambling Nests with them, I'm not going to lie, this is probably the better title. Exoskeletal Connection is just fantastic for kidnapping models and getting up the field, as well as having the ability to, when you apply parasites multiple times, deal damage. It's great. Now, your Unpack very likely is going to involve possibly 1 or 2 models dropping out a bunch of webs, ideally 4, and then having Nexus turn them into 4 eyes and ears while getting Surge on every single one of them. Mary is then going to turn one of those into probably a Husk every single turn. Now, the amount of webs that you're going to need to drop out is going to be less and less as the game goes on, because there'll be more remains markers, and also you get more value for your money as you go on with eyes and ears, so you're saving AP. But these guys you can pop at any time to essentially draw 2 cards off of. Because obviously there's 1 card from your Surge when you make it, and then 1 when they die. You can also make sure to put your nests at the start of the game from shadows in key scoring positions. Don't do this from bombs, not recommended if you want them to have a bomb. But put them in key scoring positions to node through with Nexus herself, getting webs out in position for those who need it, or just to put them in range to be Exoskeletal Connection 2. Not a bad choice. Make sure that your eyes and ears are there to refill cards, and then drop schemes down when they die. Placement is really important, so make sure your webs and remains are stuck in a good place too. If you need them on the center line, in the center, near an enemy, as and when. Getting parasites on their death and drawing a card is never invaluable, however, even if a scheme is not in a good position. Exoskeletal Connection is incredibly important to get into the right positions on the board, get to the objectives, but also to kidnap enemies and pull them away from informants markers, from boundary speed markers, from plant explosives, or to pull them into a bubble of death which you can deal with them. The main problem if you're using Heart of the Hive is that you're going to be a little bit, just a little bit, too reliant on the Will of Cadmus. It costs a stone to use, but it is an obey that you can do through 12 inches, obviously a different person each time. But getting them to have the enemy interact on your behalf, or to move or do an action is invaluable. And let's be honest, as long as you've got peons in range to die near Meredith, you're going to have a lot of stones, and when you're killing enemy, you're getting stones. And if you transmute stones onto allies, parasites onto allies, when they die too, you're also getting a lot of stones. it's just something to be aware of, that you never really want to run out. This keyword is really good on the majority of missions. The only one I probably wouldn't do them too much on is the boundary dispute, of which I actually prefer the one of many. So looking at one of many, it is better on boundary dispute for a few reasons, which we'll get to. First of all, these guys like to keep together. They really need it because, you know, most of their defenses are inbuilt from that. They've got a lot smaller ranges on attacks, but they also really need to have targets in mind for their masters to replace into. And the masters are important to keep alive because, aside from summoning more eyes and ears and keeping that chain going, these guys also, you know, can get a min for damage attack if they get a ram and their target's in a web. Like, that's 7, so it's really good. Webs obviously have become a lot more relevant, as kinda have parasites. Now, parasites you can get out a lot easier using Soul Shock to drain their hand and get parasites on anything, and this is going to make it a lot easier for you to lower their dual totals and get attacks off later. But also using transmutation on spelleaters to turn conditions into parasites on you and enemies is going to be fantastic to get that soulstone farm running. The webs, on the other hand, you really need to get someone to pump them out, be that the Archivist, be that a Berserker Husk, whoever gets webs out. A lot of them, please, because the masters really need them to get the most out of them. Make sure to keep any rams in hand to empower or to cheat with to make sure you can delete things. That's the best use for them. You've got a lot of way of drawing cards, either through Eyes and Ears dying or through the Archivist, so yeah, make sure you get those rams in hand. Between spelleater pushes and 3 masters, however, you have a lot more AP at your disposal, especially because you can summon spelleaters as well. Now, you can also summon spelleaters in the other keyword, don't get me wrong, but they're going to be a little bit more focused on killing within that title. Now, this, you are focusing on your AP usage, and getting the pushes off the spelleaters allows you to push your boundary dispute markers more effectively with other models. Especially 3 masters, who largely their AP isn't going to be used for a lot outside of murdering. Now, don't forget, Mary really needs to make a spellie or a Berserker Husk every turn. She's still going to be taken in this crew. She's your main source of soul stones when your peons die, and upgrading is always a good idea. Hopefully this guide has been somewhat helpful. If you've got any more questions, please leave them in the comments down below and I'll try and get to them. Also, feel free to let us know exactly who you want to see next. It is the Bayou faction next. They're the only one I've not done a crew for yet, so get your ideas in the comments down below on who you want to see, and if you have enjoyed, like, subscribe, and maybe I'll see you next time. This has been Tabletop Odyssey. Keep Malifauxing.